The woman sitting across from him at the candlelit table had memorized exactly 47 steps from the restaurant entrance to table 12, and she counted every single one while pretending to admire the autumn decorations hanging from the exposed brick walls. Georgia Wright had perfected the art of deception over 3 years of navigating a world she could no longer see. She'd learned to tilt her head at just the right angle when someone entered a room, tracking them by sound rather than sight. She'd mastered the subtle sweep of her fingers across table edges to locate her wineglass without fumbling. She'd practiced her smile in the mirror before her vision faded completely, memorizing the exact muscles needed to look engaged, interested, alive. Tonight's date was attempt number 6 at finding someone who might want her despite the secret she carried like a stone in her chest. Michael something. They'd matched on an app 3 weeks ago, and his messages had been kind, funny even. He worked in finance, enjoyed hiking on weekends, and had a golden retriever named Biscuit. Safe, normal. Everything Georgia desperately wanted her life to be again. "So you're an art appraiser?" Michael asked, his voice coming from slightly left of where she'd aimed her gaze. She adjusted smoothly, years of practice making the correction nearly invisible. "Was," Georgia said, reaching for her water glass. Her fingertips brushed the stem precisely where she'd mapped it 2 minutes earlier. "I'm transitioning into consulting now. Helping galleries with acquisitions, that sort of thing." It wasn't entirely a lie. She did consult, though most of her income came from telephone assessments and research she could do with screen readers. The art world she'd loved had become a minefield of visual cues she could no longer interpret. "That sounds fascinating," Michael said, and Georgia heard the scrape of his fork against his plate. Salmon, if she'd interpreted the waiter's description correctly. Her own chicken marsala sat mostly untouched, too risky to navigate without making a mess. "Do you go to many gallery openings?" "When I can," Georgia lied, hating herself for it. "My schedule's been busy lately." The truth was, she hadn't been to an opening in 8 months. The last time she'd tried, she'd knocked over a sculpture worth more than her annual rent, and the sound of it shattering had echoed through her nightmares for weeks afterward. Michael launched into a story about his company's quarterly earnings, and Georgia let his words wash over her while she focused on the symphony of sounds that helped her construct the restaurant around her. Clinking silverware from the left, probably the corner booth. Low conversation and laughter from behind her, a group celebrating something. The kitchen doors swinging open and shut with rhythmic precision as servers moved back and forth. And something else. Something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Someone was watching her. She'd developed a sixth sense for observation over the past 3 years. A hyper-awareness born from vulnerability. The attention felt heavy, focused, unlike the casual glances of other diners. "Georgia?" Michael's voice cut through her distraction. "You okay?" "Yes, sorry," she said, forcing warmth into her smile. "Just thought I heard someone I know." She hadn't, of course. She could rarely identify people by sound alone unless they spoke. But it gave her an excuse for her distraction, and Michael seemed to accept it. Pivoting to ask about her taste in music, the weight of observation didn't lift. If anything, it intensified. When the waiter came to clear their plates, Georgia tracked his movements by the soft rustle of his uniform, the slight displacement of air as he reached across the table. She'd learned to read the world through everything except her eyes. "Can I interest you in dessert?" the waiter asked, his voice young and eager. "I think we'll just take the check," Michael said before Georgia could respond, and something in his tone made her stomach tighten. The slight awkwardness, the way his fork had been scraping more frantically as the evening progressed. This was rejection in real time wrapped in politeness. "Actually, yes," a new voice said, and Georgia's entire body went rigid. "The lady will have the chocolate torte. I'll have an espresso." The voice was midnight-given sound, dark and smooth and absolutely certain of its authority. It came from directly beside their table, and Georgia hadn't heard anyone approach. No footsteps, no displacement of air, nothing. "I'm sorry, sir, but this table is occupied," the waiter said nervously. "I'm aware," the stranger said. "I'm also aware that Mr. Patterson here was about to end this evening prematurely, which would be a terrible waste." Michael made a strangled sound. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things," the stranger said, and Georgia felt the air shift as he moved. A chair scraped back across from her, the one Michael had been occupying. "I know, for instance, that you've been texting your ex-girlfriend under the table for the past 20 minutes. I know that you have no intention of calling Georgia again, despite your promises otherwise. And I know that you're going to leave now, and let me have this conversation in private." "Who the hell do you think you are?" Michael demanded, but his voice shook. Georgia heard him stand, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. Someone far more dangerous than you want to discover, the stranger said pleasantly. Go. Michael left. Georgia tracked his retreat by his heavy footsteps, faster than his arrival, nearly running. The restaurant's ambient noise had dropped to near silence. Everyone was listening now. You've frightened off my date, Georgia said, keeping her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. She angled her face toward where the stranger's voice had originated, praying she'd calculated correctly. Your date was unworthy, the stranger said. And you knew it. You've been counting minutes until you could leave with your dignity intact. Georgia's breath caught. How could he possibly know that? I'm not interested in whatever you're selling, she said, reaching for her purse. Her fingers found it exactly where she'd placed it, hooked over the back of her chair. I'm not selling anything, the stranger said. I'm observing. You've been performing quite a show tonight, Miss Wright. 47 steps, 3 turns. 2 near corrections when your date moved your silverware. You haven't actually looked at him once, not truly. You've been looking at where you think he should be based on sound and memory. Georgia's blood turned to ice. Her hand froze on her purse strap. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Yes, you do, the stranger said, and his voice held something that might have been sympathy if it weren't so absolute in its confidence. You're blind. You've been hiding it brilliantly, but I see everything, Georgia Wright. It's both blessing and curse of what I am. Panic clawed up Georgia's throat. 3 years of carefully constructed normalcy, demolished in seconds by a stranger's observation. She stood abruptly, misjudged the table's position, and her hip caught the edge. Her water glass toppled with a crash that seemed to echo through the silent restaurant. Hands caught her arms, steadying her. The stranger's hands cool even through the fabric of her dress. The touch sent electricity racing up her spine, wrong and right in equal measure. Let me go, Georgia said, but her voice came out broken. I'm going to help you walk out of here with your head high, the stranger said quietly, close enough now that she could feel his breath against her ear. You're going to take my arm. We're going to leave together as though we planned this. And then we're going to talk, because you're in danger that you don't even comprehend yet. I'm in danger from you, Georgia said. Yes, the stranger agreed, but not the kind you think. Trust me for the next 5 minutes, Georgia. I promise you'll want to hear what I have to say. She should refuse. She should call for help, demand the manager, anything except follow this stranger who'd somehow seen through every defense she'd built. But something in his voice, some quality of absolute certainty, made her hesitate. 5 minutes, she said. That's all I need. He guided her through the restaurant with a surety that told Georgia he'd mapped every obstacle before approaching her table. His arm was solid beneath her hand, and he moved with inhuman grace, adjusting their path before she even sensed the need. They passed through what felt like a wake of whispers, the other diner's shock at Michael's departure and her immediate replacement. The October night air hit her face like a blessing. Georgia breathed it in, trying to steady herself. There's a car waiting, the stranger said. Black sedan 3 feet to your right. I'm not kidnapping you. I'm taking you somewhere we can speak privately, and then I'll return you home safely, if that's what you wish. That's exactly what a kidnapper would say, Georgia pointed out, but she let him guide her forward anyway. Some instinct deeper than logic told her this man meant what he said. He wasn't going to hurt her, at least not physically. The car's interior smelled of leather and something else, something old and faintly metallic. The seats were impossibly soft, and when the stranger settled beside her, the space felt suddenly smaller. My name is Wolfram, he said as the car began to move, and I am the vampire king of the Eastern Territories. Georgia laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound came out slightly hysterical, echoing in the car's confines. Vampire king, right. Is this some kind of elaborate role-play thing? Because I'm really not interested. I wish it were that simple, Wolfram said, and something in his tone cut through her disbelief. But I'm afraid I'm being entirely literal. Vampires exist, Georgia. We've existed alongside humanity for thousands of years, hidden in plain sight, and you've managed to catch the attention of someone from my world who doesn't have your best interests at heart. The car turned, and Georgia gripped the door handle. This is insane. Let me out. In 3 years of blindness, have you never wondered why you developed such acute hearing? Wolfram asked. Why you can sense observation from across a room? Why you navigate darkness better than most sighted people navigate light? Georgia went still. She had wondered. She had attributed it to adaptation, to necessity making her sharper. But there had been moments when her awareness felt impossible, when she knew things she shouldn't be able to know. What are you saying? She asked. I'm saying that you were marked, Wolfram said. 3 years ago, someone from my world did something to you. I can smell their trace on you still, faded but present. The mark is why you lost your sight. It's also why you survived losing it so completely. They took your eyes, Georgia, but they gave you something else in exchange. The question is why? This is crazy, Georgia said. But her voice lacked conviction. 3 years ago, she'd woken up one morning with her vision blurring. By nightfall, she'd been completely blind. The doctors had run every test imaginable and found nothing wrong. No tumor, no nerve damage, no explanation. Her eyes looked perfectly healthy even as they ceased to function. I know it sounds impossible, Wolfram said, but deep down, you know something was never right about your blindness. You know it wasn't natural. The car stopped. Georgia heard Wolfram's door open, then he was at her side, offering his hand. She took it, hating herself for the trust she was placing in a stranger who claimed to be a vampire. Where are we? She asked as he guided her out. My residence in the city, Wolfram said. We're going to go inside and I'm going to show you something that will prove I'm telling the truth. Then we're going to discuss who marked you and why they might be returning. Returning? Georgia's voice rose. What do you mean, returning? Someone was watching you at that restaurant, Wolfram said. Not me, though I was watching too. Someone else, someone with vampire blood who's been tracking you for at least 3 days. I've had my people monitoring the pattern. They were going to approach you tonight. That's why I intervened. Georgia's legs felt weak. Wolfram's hand tightened on her elbow, steadying her as they walked. She counted steps out of habit, 42 from the car to what sounded like heavy doors. They opened with a whisper of well-oiled hinges, and the temperature dropped noticeably. The interior space felt vast. Georgia heard the echo of their footsteps against what might be marble floors. The air smelled old in a way that had nothing to do with mustiness, old like stone and earth and time itself. How many steps to the nearest chair? Georgia asked. 17 forward, 3 to the left, Wolfram said immediately. But I'll guide you. He did, with the same effortless grace he'd shown at the restaurant. When Georgia settled into what felt like a velvet-upholstered chair, she exhaled slowly. I'm going to prove myself to you now, Wolfram said from somewhere ahead of her. I'm going to move faster than any human can move. Listen carefully. Georgia heard his voice from her left, then impossibly from her right, then behind her, then in front again. All within the span of a single second, too fast for anyone to have actually moved. Parlor trick, she said, but her voice shook. This is better, Wolfram said, and suddenly his hand was on hers. His skin was cold, far colder than the autumn night outside. Feel my wrist. Tell me what you notice. George's fingers found his wrist, pressing against where his pulse should be. Nothing, no heartbeat, no throb of blood beneath the skin. Just cool, smooth flesh that felt more like marble than human tissue. You're cold, she whispered. I'm dead, Wolfram corrected. I died in 1347, during the first wave of the Black Death. I was 28 years old. I've been 28 for nearly 700 years. Georgia snatched her hand back. Her rational mind screamed that this was impossible, but the evidence of her other senses couldn't be denied. No heartbeat, impossible speed, that voice of absolute certainty. Why me, she asked. If vampires exist, if someone marked me, why? I'm nobody. I was just an art appraiser. I had a normal, boring life. That's what we need to determine, Wolfram said. He'd moved again, this time to her right, and she heard liquid pouring. Glass on glass. But I have theories. Drink this. It's wine, nothing more. It will help with the shock. Georgia accepted the glass, her fingers wrapping around cool crystal. She sipped cautiously. The wine was excellent, rich and complex. It steadied her slightly. What are your theories? She asked. Vampires occasionally mark humans for future turning, Wolfram said. The mark makes the human more attuned to our world, easier to transition when the time comes. But the mark you carry is unusual. It's not a claiming mark. It's more like surveillance. Someone's been watching me for 3 years? Georgia's stomach turned. Someone wanted to be able to find you, Wolfram said. To track you even at a distance. The blindness might have been an accident, an unexpected side effect. Or it might have been intentional, a way to make you more dependent, more vulnerable. To what end? Georgia demanded. That's what I intend to discover, Wolfram said. But first, I need to know everything about the time before you lost your sight. Anything unusual, any encounters with strangers, any places you visited that felt wrong somehow. Georgia's mind raced backward through time. 3 years ago, she'd been working at a prestigious auction house, handling estate sales and private collections. Her days had been filled with dusty attics and climate-controlled vaults, examining paintings and sculptures and artifacts. There was a collection, she said slowly, an estate sale in upstate New York. The owner had died, some old European family with a manor that had been closed up for decades. I was sent to assess the art before the auction. Go on, Wolfram said, and she heard the sharp interest in his voice. It was strange, Georgia continued. The house felt wrong from the moment I entered. Cold despite the summer heat. Dark even in the middle of the day, like the windows didn't let in enough light. And the art was incredible but disturbing. Portraits that seemed to watch you. Landscapes that looked more like nightmares than places. What was the family name? Devereux, Georgia said. Anton Devereux. He'd been a recluse, living alone for years before his death. There were rumors he was eccentric, possibly dangerous. But his collection was worth millions, so the auction house didn't care. Wolfram made a sound that might have been a curse in another language. Devereux, of course. You knew him? Georgia asked. I knew of him, Wolfram said. Anton Devereux was vampire, one of the old bloodlines. He was also insane, driven mad by centuries of isolation and paranoia. If he marked you before his death, it was for a reason. Did you touch anything in his manor? Any artifact that seemed particularly significant? Georgia thought back, pushing through memories that had faded with the loss of her sight. There was a mirror, she said. In the main hall, floor to ceiling, framed in what looked like black iron. It was the only piece not tagged for auction. When I asked about it, the estate lawyer said it was specifically excluded from the sale, designated for destruction per Devereux's will. Did you look into it? Wolfram's voice was urgent now. Yes, Georgia whispered. I remember thinking it was strange because my reflection looked wrong. Darker somehow, like I was seeing myself through shadow, and my eyes. She trailed off, the memory suddenly vivid. My eyes looked different in the reflection. They glowed slightly, almost golden. He bound you through that mirror, Wolfram said. It's an old form of vampire magic, nearly forgotten. He marked your reflection, which marked your true self. The blindness came when the mirror was destroyed. The magic backlashed, taking your sight but leaving the connection intact. What connection? Georgia asked, though part of her already knew the answer. You see the vampire world now, Wolfram said. Not with your eyes, but with something deeper. That's why you navigate so well. Why you sense observation. You're perceiving reality the way vampires do, through awareness beyond mere sight. Devereux gave you that, whether intentionally or not, but why? Georgia set down her wine glass with shaking hands. What could he possibly want with me? I don't know yet, Wolfram admitted, but someone else does. The vampire who's been tracking you, they're connected to Devereux somehow. They want to finish whatever he started. So what do I do? Georgia asked. Hide? Run? I've built a life here despite everything. I can't just abandon it. You don't have to, Wolfram said, and suddenly he was kneeling before her, close enough that she could feel the cool air that seemed to emanate from him. I'm going to protect you, Georgia. It's not just obligation, though as king of the Eastern Territories, protecting humans from rogue vampires is technically my responsibility. It's interest. You intrigue me. I intrigue you, Georgia repeated flatly. A blind woman who got tangled up in vampire nonsense intrigues the vampire king. That's just great. You're not just a blind woman, Wolfram said. You're a blind woman who's been functioning in the sighted world for 3 years through nothing but determination and intelligence. You've hidden your condition so thoroughly that even the people close to you don't know. That requires extraordinary strength. People close to me do know, Georgia said. My family, my friends, do they? Wolfram interrupted. I've researched you, Georgia Wright. Your parents live in California. You call them weekly, never video chat. Your friends are mostly colleagues from before your blindness. People you've systematically distanced yourself from. You have no one close enough to see the truth. Georgia's throat tightened. He was right, she'd isolated herself, too proud to let anyone see her struggle, too afraid of pity to maintain real connections. That's not protection, she said. That's loneliness. I know. Wolfram said softly. I've lived with loneliness for 7 centuries. I recognize it in others. Something in his voice made Georgia's heart ache. She reached out instinctively, her hand finding his shoulder. The muscles beneath his shirt were solid and cool, inhuman but not repulsive. What do we do now? She asked. Now I take you home, Wolfram said. I'll have guards stationed around your building, invisible but present. Tomorrow I'll begin investigating Devereux's legacy and identifying who's tracking you. And you're going to continue your life as normally as possible, which means not telling anyone about this conversation. You want me to just pretend everything's fine? Georgia asked incredulously. I want you to survive, Wolfram said. Whoever's tracking you won't move openly yet. They're waiting for something, some sign or signal. If you change your behavior drastically, it might accelerate their timeline. We need more information before they strike. Georgia wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. She nodded slowly. Wolfram stood, and she heard him move across the room. One more thing, he said. I'm going to give you something. He returned and pressed a small object into her hand. It was smooth and warm, roughly oval-shaped. Georgia's fingers explored it automatically. It's a stone, Wolfram explained, carved with protective runes. Keep it with you always. If you're in immediate danger, squeeze it 3 times rapidly. I'll know, and I'll come. Like a vampire panic button, Georgia said, trying for humor. Exactly like that, Wolfram said, and she heard the smile in his voice. He took her home in the same black sedan, guiding her back up to her apartment with the same careful attention. At her door, he paused. I'll be watching, he said. You won't see me, but I'll be there. I never see anyone, Georgia pointed out. Kind of my defining characteristic right now, Georgia, Wolfram said, and his hand cupped her cheek with startling gentleness. You see more than most people ever will, don't diminish that. Then he was gone. Georgia heard his footsteps retreat down the hall, impossibly silent. She went inside, locked her door, and stood in the darkness of her apartment trying to process everything that had happened. Vampires were real. She'd been marked by one. Another was hunting her, and the Vampire King himself had appointed himself her protector. Georgia laughed, the sound slightly manic. 3 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether Michael from finance would want a second date. Now she was apparently entangled in centuries-old vampire politics. She made her way to her bedroom, counting steps out of habit, and changed into pajamas. The stone Wolfram had given her went on her nightstand within easy reach. As she lay in bed, Georgia's fingers traced its surface, feeling the grooves of runes she couldn't see. Sleep was impossible. Her mind kept returning to Wolfram's words, to the certainty in his voice when he said he'd protect her. She barely knew him, yet something about his presence had felt safe, despite the danger he represented. Dawn was breaking when Georgia finally dozed off, the stone clutched in her hand. The next 3 days passed in surreal normalcy. Georgia went to her consultation job at a gallery downtown, spent her evenings researching vampire lore through screen readers, and tried not to think about invisible guards supposedly watching her building. She also couldn't stop thinking about Wolfram. His voice kept echoing through her mind, that dark velvet certainty, the cool touch of his hand, the way he'd move through space like he owned it, because he probably did. On the 4th day he returned. Georgia was in her apartment, listening to an audiobook about medieval art, when she felt that now familiar weight of observation. She stood, her hand automatically going to the stone in her pocket. You don't need that, Wolfram's voice said from her living room. Not for me. Georgia's heart jumped. How did you get in? I knocked, Wolfram said. You were absorbed in your book and didn't hear. The door was unlocked. It wasn't, Georgia said with absolute certainty. She always locked it. All right, I picked the lock, Wolfram admitted. But I did it politely. Despite everything, Georgia smiled. Breaking and entering is polite now? When done by royalty, certainly, Wolfram said, and she heard him move closer. I have news, not all of it good. Georgia's smile faded. Tell me. I've identified the vampire tracking you, Wolfram said. Her name is Céline Marchand. She was Anton Devereaux's protégée, turned by him during the French Revolution. She's been searching for something Devereaux hid before his death, something he apparently encoded in that mirror you looked into. In Ted how? Georgia asked. Vampire magic can store information in reflections, Wolfram explained. If Devereaux knew he was dying, he might have hidden knowledge about something valuable in the mirror, then marked you as a living key. Your reflection carried the information, and when the mirror was destroyed, that information transferred to you. But I don't know anything, Georgia protested. I don't have any hidden knowledge about Devereaux or his secrets. Not consciously, Wolfram said. But it's there, locked somewhere in your mind. Céline believes she can extract it, probably through turning you. The process of becoming vampires sometimes brings buried memories to the surface, so she wants to turn me into a vampire to access information I don't even know I have. Georgia's voice rose. That's insane. Yes, Wolfram agreed. Which is why we're not going to let it happen. I have a plan, but it's going to require your trust. What kind of plan? Georgia asked warily. Céline will make her move soon, Wolfram said. She's been watching you for days, waiting for the right moment. I propose we give her one, but on our terms. A public event where she'll feel confident enough to approach, but where I can maintain control. You want to use me as bait, Georgia said. I want to bring this to a conclusion, Wolfram corrected. There's a vampire gathering tomorrow night. A monthly assembly of the Eastern Territories Court. Technically neutral ground, but my territory nonetheless. If you attend as my guest, Céline will have to approach diplomatically. We can confront her there, demand she explain herself, and resolve this without violence. And if she doesn't want a diplomatic solution? Georgia asked. Then I'll protect you, Wolfram said simply. Georgia, I give you my word as king. No harm will come to you while you're under my protection. Georgia wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed that attending a vampire gathering was monumentally stupid, But the alternative was waiting for Celine to attack on her own terms, possibly in her sleep or on a dark street. What would I need to do, she asked. Attend the gathering with me, Wolfram said. I'll guide you through everything. The vampire court will know you're human, but they'll also know you're under my protection. No one will dare touch you, except Celine, Georgia pointed out. Celine will have to follow court protocol, Wolfram said. She can challenge my protection, but she'll have to do it formally with witnesses. That gives us leverage. Georgia took a breath. All right, I'll do it. Thank you, Wolfram said, and she heard genuine relief in his voice. I'll collect you tomorrow at 8, dress formally. The court takes appearances seriously. I'm blind, Georgia said dryly. I'm going to need help with that. I'll send someone, Wolfram promised. Someone trustworthy who can assist you. He left the same way he'd arrived, silent as shadows. Georgia stood in her living room, processing what she'd agreed to. A vampire gathering. She was going to a vampire gathering. She needed to call someone. Her mother, a friend, anyone who could talk sense into her. But who would believe her? And what could they do anyway? Georgia went to bed early, though sleep was elusive. Tomorrow night she'd enter a world she still barely believed existed. The next day crawled past with agonizing slowness. At 6 in the evening, someone knocked on Georgia's door. She opened it cautiously, the protection stone in her pocket. Wright? A woman's voice asked, cultured and cool. I'm Isolde. Lord Wolfram sent me to assist you. You're a vampire, Georgia said. It wasn't a question. She could sense something other about Isolde's presence, the same quality Wolfram carried. I am, Isolde confirmed. May I enter? Georgia stepped aside. Isolde moved past her with that same inhuman grace, and Georgia heard the rustle of what sounded like expensive fabric. Lord Wolfram said you need help selecting appropriate attire, Isolde said. I've brought several options. For the next hour, Isolde helped Georgia dress. The vampire woman's hands were efficient and surprisingly gentle, guiding Georgia into what felt like a silk gown that draped elegantly. Isolde styled her hair, applied makeup with expert precision, and added jewelry that felt antique against Georgia's skin. You look lovely, Isolde said when she finished. Lord Wolfram will be pleased. I'm not dressing to please him, Georgia said, though the words lacked conviction. Of course not, Isolde said diplomatically. But it doesn't hurt that you will anyway. Wolfram arrived at precisely 8 o'clock. Georgia heard his sharp intake of breath when she opened the door, and warmth bloomed in her chest despite herself. You're beautiful, Wolfram said quietly. Not that you weren't before, but Isolde has outdone herself. I'll take that as a compliment, Georgia said. Are you ready? The question is whether you are, Wolfram said. Last chance to back out, Georgia. I won't think less of you. Georgia straightened her spine. I'm ready. The ride to the gathering was longer than Georgia expected. They drove for nearly an hour, leaving the city behind. When they finally stopped, the air smelled different, cleaner, with hints of pine and earth. We're in the mountains, Wolfram explained as he helped her from the car. The court meets in an estate built into the rock itself. It's been vampire territory for over 2 centuries. He guided her forward, and Georgia felt the temperature drop as they entered what must be a tunnel. Their footsteps echoed against stone walls, and the air grew heavy with age and power. There are stairs ahead, Wolfram murmured. 37 of them descending. I'll guide you. Georgia took his arm, and they descended together. By the time they reached the bottom, Georgia's other senses were screaming with awareness. She could feel presences all around, cold and watchful and utterly inhuman. Dozens of them, maybe more. Announcing Wolfram Calidus, king of the Eastern Territories, a voice called out, formal and resonant, and his guest, Miss Georgia Wright. Silence fell. Georgia felt every vampire's attention focus on her like a physical weight. They're staring, she whispered to Wolfram. You're human in a vampire court, Wolfram said. And you're with me, of course they're staring. He led her forward and Georgia counted steps automatically. 53 paces, then Wolfram stopped. She heard him sit, and realized he'd brought her to some kind of throne or elevated seat. Sit beside me, Wolfram said, guiding her to a chair. You're my honored guest. No one will question your presence. Georgia sat, her hands gripping the chair's arms. Around her, conversation slowly resumed, but she could tell the vampires were still intensely aware of her. Lord Wolfram, a new voice said, male and oily with false politeness. How unusual to see you bring a human to our gathering. Has the king developed new tastes? Watch your tone, Cassius, Wolfram said coldly. Miss Wright is under my personal protection. Any disrespect toward her is disrespect toward me. Cassius made a sound of mock contrition. Of course, my lord, no offense intended. But Georgia heard the malice beneath his words. She'd made enemies simply by existing here. The gathering proceeded with what seemed to be formal business. Vampires approached Wolfram with requests, disputes, political maneuvering. Georgia listened, trying to understand the dynamics. There were factions within the court, alliances and betrayals spoken in careful euphemisms. And through it all, she felt that specific weight of observation she'd come to associate with Celine. The vampire was here, watching, waiting. She's in the back left corner, Wolfram murmured to Georgia so quietly only she could hear. She's been watching you since we arrived. What do we do? Georgia asked. We wait, Wolfram said. She'll make her move when the formal business concludes. Patience. Another hour passed. Georgia's back ached from sitting so straight, and her nerves were frayed from the constant awareness of predators surrounding her. But she maintained her composure, refusing to show weakness. Finally, Wolfram stood. The formal session is concluded, he announced. Those who wish to socialize may remain. Those who have other business may depart with my blessing. Most of the vampires seemed to stay. Georgia heard the shuffle of movement as they formed smaller groups, conversation rising in volume. Now, Wolfram said quietly to Georgia. She's approaching. Georgia's hand went to the stone in her pocket, but she didn't squeeze it, not yet. Lord Wolfram, a woman's voice said, smooth as honey and twice as sweet. What an unexpected pleasure, and you've brought a human guest. How, progressive Celine Marchand, Wolfram said, his voice gone flat and dangerous. I was wondering when you'd work up the courage to approach. Courage? Celine laughed. I have nothing to fear from you, my lord. I've broken no laws. Stalking a human under my protection isn't breaking laws, Wolfram asked. I haven't stalked anyone, Celine said. I've simply been observing someone who possesses something that belongs to me by right. I don't possess anything of yours, Georgia said, finding her voice. She angled her face toward Celine, though she couldn't see the vampire. Oh, but you do, Celine purred. My maker, Anton Devereaux, hid something precious before his death. He encoded the location in a mirror, and you looked into that mirror. The information is locked inside you, little human. And I want it. What information? Georgia demanded. I don't know anything. Not consciously. Celine agreed. But it's there. All I need to do is turn you, and during the transformation your mind will open like a flower. I'll be able to see everything Devereaux hid from me. You're not turning her, Wolfram said, stepping between Georgia and Celine. She's under my protection. Touch her, and you declare war on my territory. Then let's negotiate, Celine said. Give me the girl for one night. Let me turn her, extract the information, and I'll leave your territory forever. She'll even survive the process if you insist. I'll make her transition clean. Absolutely not, Wolfram said. Then you're condemning her to a life of looking over her shoulder, Celine said. I'll never stop hunting her, my lord. Not while she carries what I need. What could possibly be worth this obsession? Georgia asked. What did Devereaux hide? Celine was silent for a moment. The location of the Crimson Chalice, she finally said. An artifact of immense power, one of the 3 great treasures of the vampire world. Devereaux stole it centuries ago, and he was the only one who knew where he'd hidden it. With the chalice, I could challenge even a king's authority. So this is about power, Wolfram said. Of course it is. Everything is about power, Celine said. You should know that better than anyone, Lord Wolfram. You didn't become king through kindness. I became king through strength and the will of the court, Wolfram said. Not through theft and coercion. The chalice was hidden by Devereaux for good reason. He knew it was too dangerous to be used. He was a coward, Celine spat. And now his secrets die with this human unless you let me claim what's mine. Nothing about Georgia is yours, Wolfram said, and his voice dropped to a register that made Georgia's bones ache. Power radiated from him, filling the space with pressure. She is mine to protect, and I do not yield what is mine. The cavern went silent. Every vampire present was listening now, witnessing what might be about to unfold. You're claiming her? Celine asked, disbelief clear in her voice. Formally? If that's what it takes, Wolfram said. Georgia's breath caught. She didn't fully understand vampire politics, but even she could sense the weight of what Wolfram had just offered. My lord, another voice interjected, older and more measured. Perhaps we should discuss this more carefully. A formal claim is not something to declare in the heat of argument. I know exactly what I'm doing, Marcus, Wolfram said. Celine, I claim Georgia Wright under the old laws. She is mine by right of protection, by choice of association, and by my will as king. Challenge the claim if you dare, but know that you'll face me directly. Georgia heard Celine's sharp intake of breath. You'd risk your position for a human, one you barely know? I'd risk far more than my position. Wolfram said quietly. Test me and see. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Celine laughed, the sound brittle and furious. You're a fool, she said. But I'm not. I won't challenge a king's formal claim, not here with the entire court as witness. But know this, Lord Wolfram, the moment your protection wavers, the moment she steps outside your reach, I'll be waiting. And someday you will slip. Then I'll make certain I never do. Wolfram said. Georgia heard Celine leave, her footsteps sharp against stone. The tension in the cavern eased slightly, though wariness remained. The gathering is concluded, Wolfram announced. Everyone leave now. The vampires obeyed, filing out with surprising speed. Within minutes, only Georgia and Wolfram remained in the vast underground space. What just happened? Georgia asked, her voice shaking. I claimed you, Wolfram said. He sounded tired. It's an old vampire law, rarely invoked. By claiming you formally before the court, I've made you untouchable. Any vampire who harms you harms me directly. It's the strongest protection I can offer. But what does it mean? Georgia asked. What did I just become? Mine, Wolfram said simply. In the eyes of vampire law, you're under my dominion. It's not quite marriage, not quite ownership, something in between. You're bound to my protection, and I'm bound to provide it. For how long? Georgia whispered. Until I release you or until you die, Wolfram said. Whichever comes first. Georgia should have been angry. She should have demanded he take it back, rescind the claim. But instead she felt something else. Safe. For the first time in 3 years, she felt truly safe. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Wolfram said. The claim comes with complications. You'll need to stay close to me now. My enemies will see you as a weakness, a way to strike at me. And you'll be drawn deeper into vampire politics whether you want to be or not. Deeper than attending a vampire court gathering? Georgia asked dryly. Wolfram laughed, the sound genuine. Fair point. He helped her stand, and they made their way back up the 37 stairs, through the tunnel, into the clean mountain air. The car waited where they'd left it. During the drive back to the city, Wolfram explained more about the claim. Georgia would need to carry something of his, a token that marked her as protected. She'd need to report to him regularly, not because he didn't trust her, but because the court would expect it. And she'd need to be careful, more careful than ever, because Celine wasn't the only vampire who might see her as a target now. I should be terrified, Georgia said. I should be demanding you take me home and leave me alone. But you're not, Wolfram observed. No, Georgia agreed. I'm not. Why is that? Because you're tired of being alone, Wolfram said quietly. And because, despite everything, you trust me, don't you? Georgia considered lying. But she'd built her entire life post-blindness on lies and half-truths. With Wolfram, she wanted to be honest. Yes, she said. I trust you. I don't know why, but I do. That's more than I deserve, Wolfram said. But I'll try to be worthy of it. They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Georgia asked, what happens now? Now you come to stay at my residence, Wolfram said. Not permanently. Just until we resolve the situation with Celine. Your apartment isn't safe anymore. She knows where I live, Georgia realized. She's known for days, Wolfram confirmed. But she won't attack you there, not after tonight. The claim prevents her from making any direct move. What worries me in direct action? She might hire human agents or try to manipulate you into leaving my protection voluntarily. I won't, Georgia said firmly. I hope not, Wolfram said. But Celine is old and cunning. She's survived revolutions and wars. Don't underestimate her patience or creativity. They arrived at Wolfram's residence, the same place he'd brought Georgia that first night. This time he led her to a different part of the building, up an elevator and down a hallway that felt residential rather than formal. This is the private wing, Wolfram explained. My quarters and guest rooms. You'll have your own space, completely separate from mine. I'm not claiming that kind of dominion over you. He showed her to a room that felt spacious and comfortable. Georgia's fingers explored the furniture, mapping it automatically. A large bed, a sitting area, what felt like a writing desk. There's an attached bathroom, Wolfram said. Through the door on your right. Everything you might need should be stocked. If I've missed anything, just ask. This is too much, Georgia said. I can't impose like this. You're not imposing, Wolfram said. You're accepting protection I offered. There's a difference. Georgia sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The evening had drained her emotionally more than any physical exertion could have. I should let you rest, Wolfram said. But I want to say something first. What? Georgia asked. She heard him move closer, felt him kneel before her the way he had that first night in his formal receiving room. I didn't claim you just because of Celine, Wolfram said. I could have found other ways to protect you, political solutions that wouldn't have bound you to me so completely. But I wanted this. I wanted the right to stand between you and danger. Does that frighten you? It should, Georgia said. Her hand reached out, finding his face. Cool skin, sharp cheekbones, hair that felt like silk between her fingers. But it doesn't. Why doesn't it? Because you feel it too, Wolfram said. This connection between us. I felt it the moment I saw you in that restaurant, hiding your blindness with such fierce determination. You captivated me, Georgia, right? I'm human, Georgia whispered. Mortal. I'll age and die while you stay young forever. Then we'll make the most of the time we have, Wolfram said. Unless you want me to turn you. I would if you asked. I'd give you eternity if you wanted it. George's breath caught. I can't think about that right now. It's too much, then don't, Wolfram said. Think about tomorrow and the day after. One day at a time, Georgia. That's all I'm asking. He stood and Georgia felt the loss of his presence like a physical ache. Sleep, Wolfram said. I'll be close if you need anything. The protection stone will still work here, but you can also just call. I'll hear you anywhere in the building. Vampire hearing? Georgia asked. Vampire obsession, Wolfram corrected. I'm attuned to you now. I'll always hear when you call. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Georgia sat in the darkness that was her constant companion, processing everything. She'd been claimed by a vampire king. She was living in his home, and despite the insanity of it all, she'd never felt more alive. She changed into pajamas that had been left in the bathroom, soft silk that felt luxurious against her skin. The bed was impossibly comfortable, and Georgia sank into it with a sigh. Sleep came quickly, deeper and more restful than she'd managed in months. Georgia woke to the sound of rain against windows. She lay still for a moment, orienting herself. Wolfram's residence, the guest room. Everything that had happened was real. Someone knocked softly on her door. Miss Wright? It's Isolde. May I enter? Come in, Georgia called, sitting up. Isolde entered with her characteristic grace. Lord Wolfram thought you might appreciate breakfast, she said, and someone to talk through your questions. He's handling court business this morning, but will join you for lunch. Court business, Georgia repeated. What does that entail for a vampire king? Disputes to settle, alliances to maintain, the usual political necessities, Isolde said. She'd moved to what sounded like a table by the windows. Come, eat. You'll need your strength. Georgia made her way over, counting steps, mapping the room more thoroughly now that she had time. Isolde guided her to a chair and began describing the breakfast laid out. Isolde, Georgia said as she ate. Can I ask you something? Of course. Wolfram said he's 700 years old. What's that like? Living for so long? Isolde was quiet for a moment. Lonely, she finally said. I've only been vampire for 200 years and already I feel the weight of it. Watching humans age and die while we remain. Wolfram has endured that for 7 centuries. It changes you, makes you distant, until something reminds you what connection feels like. Is that what I am? Georgia asked. A reminder? You're more than that, Isolde said. You're hope. Wolfram hasn't claimed anyone in over 300 years. His last claim ended badly, with the human dying despite his protection. He swore he'd never do it again. But then he met you. Georgia's chest tightened. What happened to the human? She was murdered by Wolfram's enemies, Isolde said quietly. They used her to hurt him, and it nearly destroyed him. He became colder after that, more ruthless. The vampire who ordered her death doesn't exist anymore. Wolfram made certain of that. So by claiming me, he's risking that pain again, Georgia said. Yes, Isolde confirmed, but he's also choosing to live again rather than just exist. That's worth the risk, I think. Georgia absorbed this information, understanding Wolfram better now. He wasn't just protecting her out of duty. He was fighting against centuries of self-imposed isolation. After breakfast, Isolde showed Georgia around the residence, describing each room and helping her build a mental map. The building was vast, part mansion and part fortress, with modern amenities blended seamlessly with historic architecture. Wolfram built this place in 1823, Isolde explained. It's been expanded several times, but the core structure remains. He has other residences throughout his territory, but this is his favorite. They were in what Isolde called the library when Wolfram found them. Georgia heard his approach, that whisper of movement that was nearly silent but distinct once you knew what to listen for. Isolde, thank you for taking care of Georgia, Wolfram said. Could you give us a moment? Of course, my lord, Isolde said, and Georgia heard her leave. How are you adjusting? Wolfram asked, moving to stand beside Georgia. Surprisingly well, Georgia admitted. Your home is beautiful, based on Isolde's descriptions. I'll describe it to you myself sometime, Wolfram said. If you'd like, I could show you the art collection, tell you about each piece. I know you miss that world. Georgia's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. I'd like that very much. This afternoon then, Wolfram said. But first we need to discuss strategy. Celine won't challenge my claim directly, but she'll look for weaknesses. We need to find the Crimson Chalice before she does. How? Georgia asked. If the information is locked in my mind, I can't just remember it on command. There are ways, Wolfram said. Vampire hypnosis might work, drawing out buried memories. Or we could try dreamwalking, entering your subconscious while you sleep. Both methods require your consent and cooperation. And if we find it? Georgia asked. What happens to the chalice? I'll secure it, Wolfram said. Put it somewhere even I will eventually forget, with protections that will last millennia. The chalice is too dangerous to exist in reachable space. What does it do? Georgia asked. It grants dominion over other vampires, Wolfram said. The vampire who drinks from it can command any vampire of lesser age. In the wrong hands, it could unravel everything we've built. Devereaux was right to hide it. Georgia nodded slowly. All right, let's try the hypnosis. When? Tonight, Wolfram said. I'll need to prepare properly, ensure we have privacy and protection. If Celine somehow sensed what we were doing, she might try to interfere. Will it hurt? Georgia asked. No, Wolfram assured her. You'll barely feel it. Like falling asleep, except you'll be able to hear my voice and respond. I'll guide you through your memories until we find what Devereaux hid. Okay, Georgia said. I trust you. Those words terrify me, Wolfram admitted. The responsibility of them. Georgia reached out, finding his hand. She wove her fingers through his, marveling at how right it felt despite the temperature difference. Then don't break that trust, she said simply. I won't, Wolfram promised. Now come, let me show you my favorite pieces in the art collection. They spent the afternoon in the gallery wing, Wolfram describing paintings and sculptures with the kind of detail that made Georgia feel like she could see them. He understood art in a way that transcended mere appreciation, speaking about technique and history and the emotions each piece evoked. This one is my oldest acquisition, Wolfram said, guiding Georgia's hand to a canvas. Feel the texture. The artist built up layers of paint until it was almost sculptural. Georgia's fingers traced the surface, finding ridges and valleys of dried paint. When was it made? 1356, Wolfram said. The artist died of plague 2 years later, never knowing his work would survive 7 centuries. I bought it from his widow, paid enough to keep her comfortable for the rest of her life. You knew him, Georgia realized. I knew many artists, Wolfram said. Before I became king, I was a patron. It was one way to fill the endless years, surrounding myself with beauty and creativity. Humans create such extraordinary things despite their brief lives. Perhaps because of their brief lives. Georgia heard the melancholy in his voice. Do you regret becoming vampire? Every day, Wolfram said quietly. And not at all, it's both things simultaneously. I've seen wonders that no mortal could witness. But I've also lost everyone I've ever cared about to time. The cost of immortality is steep, Georgia. Is that why you've stayed alone? Georgia asked. Why you haven't claimed anyone in 3 centuries? Isolde told you, Wolfram said. It wasn't a question. She said you lost someone, Georgia said. That it nearly destroyed you. Wolfram was silent for a long moment. Then he said, her name was Elena. I claimed her in 1687, and I loved her with everything I had. But I had enemies who knew that love was a weakness. They took her from me, slowly and cruelly, to punish me for political decisions I'd made. By the time I found her, there was nothing left to save. George's hand tightened on his. I'm sorry. I swore I'd never care that deeply again. Wolfram continued. I became the cold king everyone expected, ruthless and calculating. It was easier than feeling. And then I saw you in that restaurant, and everything I'd built to protect myself became irrelevant. Wolfram, Georgia whispered, turning to face him. He cupped her face with both hands, his touch gentle despite the strength she could sense in him. I know it's too soon. I know you barely know me. But I need you to understand that claiming you wasn't just political. It was personal, deeply, terrifyingly personal. I'm mortal, Georgia said again. Eventually I'll leave you just like Elena did. Then I'll have decades with you instead of centuries alone, Wolfram said. That's enough. More than enough. Georgia rose on her toes and kissed him. She'd been thinking about it since the moment he knelt before her in the guest room, and now she couldn't wait any longer. His lips were cool against hers but responsive, gentle at first, and then deeper as she leaned into him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Well, Georgia was breathing hard. Wolfram didn't need to breathe at all, but he did it anyway, a habit from his mortal life. That was unexpected, Wolfram said, his voice rougher than Georgia had heard it. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Georgia asked. Devastating unexpected, Wolfram said. Georgia, if we start this, I won't want to stop. I'll want everything. All of you for as long as you'll give me. Then it's good we have decades, Georgia said. Echoing his own words, Wolfram pulled her close, and they stood together in the gallery surrounded by centuries of art, vampire and human, finding something neither had expected. That night they attempted the hypnosis in Wolfram's private study. Georgia lay on a comfortable couch while Wolfram sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her forehead. Close your eyes, Wolfram said, though I suppose that's redundant for you. Georgia smiled despite her nervousness. Just tell me what to do. Listen to my voice, Wolfram said. Let it be the only thing you focus on. Everything else fades away, becomes distant and unimportant. His voice took on a quality Georgia had never heard before, layered and resonant, echoing through her mind rather than just her ears. She felt herself sinking into it, her body relaxing completely. Good, Wolfram said. Now I want you to think back 3 years, before your blindness. You're in upstate New York, assessing the Devereaux estate. Can you see it? Yes, Georgia murmured. Memory bloomed vivid and complete. She was walking through the manor again, notebook in hand, examining each piece for the auction. Find the mirror, Wolfram said. The one in the main hall. Can you see it? I'm standing in front of it, Georgia said. It's huge, taller than me. The frame is black iron worked into shapes that look like twisted branches or reaching hands. Look into the mirror, Wolfram said. Tell me what you see. Georgia stared at her reflection in memory. My eyes are glowing, gold like fire, and there's something behind me. A shadow that isn't mine. Focus on the shadow, Wolfram said. Can you see details? Georgia tried, but the shadow remained indistinct. No, it's just darkness, but it feels aware, like it's watching me. That's Devereaux's magic, Wolfram said. The encoding. Georgia, I need you to step into the mirror. It's just memory, it can't hurt you. Step into your reflection and see what's on the other side. Georgia hesitated, but Wolfram's voice steadied her. She stepped forward in memory and her reflection rippled like water. She passed through. On the other side, she wasn't in the manor anymore. She stood in darkness so complete it pressed against her like a physical thing. And in that darkness words appeared, glowing with the same golden light as her reflected eyes. I see writing, Georgia said. Coordinates, I think. And a name. Valemount Abbey, beneath the catacombs. What else? Wolfram asked urgently. A warning, Georgia said, reading the glowing text. The chalice demands blood. It takes 3 drops from the seeker, and if the seeker's intention is impure, it takes everything. Devereaux says he hid it because he couldn't bear to destroy it, but he hopes whoever finds it has the wisdom to let it stay lost. Anything else? Wolfram asked. Georgia looked around the darkness, but the words were fading. No, just those coordinates and the warning. Good, Wolfram said. You've done perfectly, Georgia. Now I'm going to bring you back. Count backward from 3 with me. 3, 3, Georgia repeated. 2, 2, 1, 1. Georgia opened her eyes, though the darkness remained the same. She was back in Wolfram's study, his hand still resting on her forehead. Did it work? She asked. Better than I hoped, Wolfram said. She heard him stand and move across the room. Paper rustled. Valemount Abbey is in northern France, in territory controlled by the old European courts. The catacombs beneath it have been sealed for 2 centuries. Retrieving the chalice will be dangerous. But now we know where it is, Georgia said, before Celine does. If she didn't sense the hypnosis, Wolfram said grimly. Vampire magic leaves traces. Any vampire attuned to you might have felt it. As if summoned by his words, alarm bells began ringing throughout the residence. Wolfram cursed in a language Georgia didn't recognize. She's attacking? Georgia asked, sitting up quickly. Not Celine, Wolfram said. Multiple vampires breaching the outer defenses. This is coordinated. She must have hired mercenaries, vampires with no allegiance to my court. What do we do? Georgia asked. You stay here, Wolfram said. This room has additional protections. No vampire except me can enter without invitation. Lock the door behind me, and don't open it for anyone. Wolfram, don't leave me here in the dark, Georgia said, hating the fear in her voice. You're always in the dark, Wolfram said gently, but you've never let it stop you. Trust yourself, Georgia, and trust that I'll come back. He kissed her quickly, fierce and desperate, then was gone. Georgia heard the door close and forced herself to stand. She locked it as instructed, then pressed her back against the solid wood, listening. The sounds of fighting reached her from deeper in the residence. Crashes and shouts, inhuman hisses and screams. Georgia's hand went to the protection stone in her pocket, but she didn't squeeze it. Wolfram was already aware of the attack. Calling him would only distract him. Minutes passed like hours. Georgia counted her heartbeats, trying to stay calm. Then she heard footsteps approaching the study, too light and quick to be Wolfram's. Georgia, Wright. A woman's voice called through the door. Celine, I know you're in there. I can smell your fear. Georgia said nothing, pressing harder against the door. You cost me valuable resources tonight, Celine continued. Mercenary vampires don't come cheap, but it was worth it to breach Wolfram's defenses. Open the door, Georgia. Give yourself to me willingly, and I'll make the transition quick. You'll barely feel pain. Go to hell, Georgia said. Celine laughed. I've been there, darling. It's not as bad as you'd think, but time's wasting. Wolfram will dispatch my mercenaries soon, and then my window closes. Open the door, or I'll find other ways to hurt you. Does your family in California know about vampires? Perhaps I should pay them a visit. Georgia's blood ran cold. Don't you dare. Then open the door, Celine said. Trade yourself for their safety. It's a fair bargain. Georgia's hand moved to the lock before she could stop herself. Then Wolfram's words echoed through her mind. The room has additional protections. No vampire except me can enter without invitation. You're bluffing, Georgia said. If you could enter, you already would have. You need me to invite you in. Celine made a sound of frustration. Clever girl, but I don't need to enter to hurt you. This door won't hold forever against sufficient force. Something heavy hit the door and Georgia stumbled back. Another impact, then another. The wood cracked but held. Stop, Wolfram's voice said from beyond the door, cold as the grave. Step away from her, Celine. Now. Or what? Celine asked. You'll kill me? I've broken no laws, merely exercised force against an unlocked door. The door is sealed by my magic, Wolfram said. Attacking it is attacking my claim directly. That gives me the right to end you, old laws or new. You won't, Celine said. You're too bound by honor, by the rules of your precious court. That's always been your weakness, Wolfram. My weakness is caring, Wolfram said. And right now, I care about the woman behind that door more than I care about honor. Test me again, Celine. See what happens. Silence. Then Celine said, This isn't over. I'll find another way. No, Wolfram said. You won't. Because I'm going to do something I should have done the moment I learned you were stalking Georgia. I'm exiling you from the Eastern Territories. You have until sunrise to leave my lands. If you're found here after dawn, it's death. No trial, no mercy. You can't exile me without court approval, Celine protested. I can when you've attacked my formerly claimed consort, Wolfram said. That's an act of rebellion. I'm well within my rights. Go, Celine, and pray we never meet again because my restraint has limits. Georgia heard Celine leave, her footsteps receding rapidly. Then Wolfram spoke through the door, his voice gentler. Georgia, it's safe now. You can open the door. Georgia unlocked it with shaking hands. Wolfram swept her into his arms immediately, holding her tight enough that she felt the desperate relief in his grip. Are you hurt? He asked, pulling back to presumably examine her. No, Georgia said, scared but not hurt. Are you okay? I'll heal, Wolfram said. Vampire resilience has its advantages. But Georgia, we need to leave. Tonight, before Celine regroups, we're going to France to retrieve the chalice before she can beat us there. Now? Georgia asked. We're just leaving? Isolde will pack for you, Wolfram said. We have a private plane waiting. It's the only way to end this. Georgia, find the chalice, secure it, and remove Celine's motivation for hunting you. Georgia nodded. It made sense, even though the thought of flying to France on a moment's notice made her head spin. 2 hours later, they were on a plane crossing the Atlantic. Georgia sat in a leather seat that probably cost more than her yearly rent, trying to process everything. Wolfram sat beside her, his hand covering hers. Tell me about Valemount Abbey, Georgia said, needing distraction. It's ancient, Wolfram said, built in the 10th century, abandoned in the 18th when the French Revolution made religious institutions dangerous. The catacombs beneath it were used for vampire gatherings before that, neutral ground where different factions could meet. They were sealed after a particularly vicious battle in 1802. No one's been down there since. So we're breaking into sealed catacombs beneath an abandoned abbey, Georgia said. That sounds safe. Wolfram's quiet laugh rumbled through her. I'll protect you. I know, Georgia said. That's the strange part. I really do know. They landed in Paris at dawn. Wolfram had arranged for a car to take them north, away from the city and into the countryside. Georgia dozed during the drive, exhausted from the previous night's attack. When she woke, they'd stopped. We're here? She asked. Close, Wolfram said. The abbey is half a mile up a private road. We'll walk from here. The car would draw too much attention. He helped her out and they began walking. The air smelled of pine and old stone, and Georgia heard wind rustling through trees. Birds sang despite the early hour. Describe it to me, Georgia said as they walked. The abbey is beautiful in a melancholy way, Wolfram said. Gray stone covered in ivy-stained glass windows long since broken. The roof has partially collapsed, but the main structure stands. It looks like something from a fairy tale, romantic and sad. They reached the abbey, and Wolfram guided Georgia inside. The temperature dropped immediately, and their footsteps echoed in what must be a vast open space. The entrance to the catacombs is beneath the altar, Wolfram said. I can see the seal from here, vampire runes carved into stone. Breaking it will take time. How much time? Georgia asked. An hour, maybe 2, Wolfram said. The magic is old and complex, but I can manage it. He settled Georgia on what felt like a stone bench, then moved away. She heard him begin chanting in that same ancient language he'd cursed in earlier. Power built in the air, prickling against her skin. Georgia sat in the darkness and waited, tracking Wolfram's progress by the changing tones of his chanting. She thought about everything that had happened in the past week. Meeting Wolfram, learning about vampires, being claimed, attacked, and now hunting for an ancient artifact in France. Her life had been small and careful for 3 years. She'd hidden her blindness, hidden herself, built walls to keep everyone out. And then Wolfram had shattered those walls simply by seeing her truly. She didn't want to go back to that small, careful life. Even with the danger, even with Celine hunting her, Georgia felt more alive than she had since losing her sight. "Georgia," Wolfram called out, "the seal is breaking. Stay where you are until I'm certain it's safe." She heard stone grinding against stone, then a rush of air from below. The smell of earth and age wafted up, along with something else, power, old and dark and patient. "The chalice is down there," Wolfram said. "I can feel it. Come, I'll guide you." They descended into the catacombs together, Wolfram describing each step, each turn. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. Georgia kept one hand on the stone wall, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down. "There are bones in niches along the walls," Wolfram said quietly. "Monks who died centuries ago laid to rest in their abbey, and further down, vampires who fell in battle. This place is a tomb in the truest sense." They walked for what felt like miles but was probably only minutes. Finally, Wolfram stopped. "We're here," he said. "There's a chamber ahead, circular, with a pedestal in the center. And on that pedestal, the crimson chalice." Georgia felt the power now, thrumming through the air like a heartbeat. It called to something in her blood, resonant and compelling. "Be careful," she said. "Devereaux's warning said it demands blood." "I remember," Wolfram said. He moved forward, his footsteps echoing in the chamber. Georgia heard him stop, presumably in front of the pedestal. "It's beautiful," Wolfram said quietly. "Red crystal that looks almost alive, carved with runes I can barely read. This is truly one of the great artifacts." "Can you move it?" Georgia asked. "Let me try," Wolfram said. She heard him reach out, then a sharp intake of breath. "It cut me. The moment I touched it, the crystal cut my hand." "3 drops," Georgia said, remembering Devereaux's warning. "It takes 3 drops from the seeker. Then it has them," Wolfram said. "The cuts are already healing, but I felt the blood drain into the crystal." "Georgia, it's glowing now. The red has turned brighter, almost like fire." "What's your intention?" Georgia asked urgently. "Devereaux said if the seeker's intention is impure, it takes everything." "To protect," Wolfram said. "That's all I want. To protect you, and to keep this artifact from being used for domination." The light, if there was light, seemed to pulse. Georgia felt it even without eyes, a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. "It's accepting you," Georgia said. "I can feel it." "Yes," Wolfram said. "The chalice recognizes pure intention. I can take it now." Georgia heard him lift the artifact and the power in the chamber shifted. It didn't disappear but redirected, flowing into Wolfram like water finding a channel. "We have it," Wolfram said. "We need to leave before we arrive," a new voice said from behind Georgia. Male, cold, amused. "I'm afraid you're too late for that, Lord Wolfram." Georgia spun toward the voice, her heart hammering. Multiple footsteps echoed in the chamber now, surrounding them. "Who are you?" Wolfram demanded. "My name is Victor Thorne," the voice said, "and I'm Celine's employer. She was merely my agent, tracking this clever human who held the map to my prize." "Thank you for retrieving it for me, Wolfram. That saves considerable effort." "You can't have it," Wolfram said. "The chalice has accepted my claim." "Then I'll take it from your corpse," Victor said pleasantly. "I have 15 vampires with me, all loyal to my cause. Even a king can't fight those odds." "Try me," Wolfram said, and Georgia heard him move to stand between her and Victor's forces. "Wolfram, no," Georgia said. "There are too many. I won't let them have you," Wolfram said. "Or the chalice. Georgia, when I move, run. Follow the wall back the way we came. Get to the surface and find help." "I can't leave you," Georgia protested. "You can and will," Wolfram said, "because I'm commanding you as the vampire who claimed you. Run, Georgia. Please." Then chaos erupted. Wolfram moved with that impossible speed, and the chamber filled with the sounds of combat. Georgia stumbled backward, her hands finding the stone wall. She ran, counting steps, trying to remember the path they'd taken down. Behind her, the fighting intensified. She heard Wolfram's voice raised in commands, heard the screams of vampires falling. But there were so many of them, and he was just one vampire, even if he was a king. Georgia reached what she thought was the passage back to the surface. She was about to enter when someone grabbed her from behind. Cold hands, inhuman strength. "Going somewhere?" Celine's voice purred in her ear. "Victor promised me you if I led him to the chalice. I think I'll turn you right here, let you see your precious king fall through new vampire eyes." "No," Georgia said, and her hand found the protection stone in her pocket. She squeezed it 3 times rapidly, as hard as she could. Celine laughed. "What's that going to do? Summon Wolfram? He's a bit busy dying." But the stone flared hot in Georgia's hand, burning through her pocket. Celine screamed and released her, stumbling back. "Bitch," Celine spat. "You burned me." "Good," Georgia said, and ran into the passage. She made it 10 steps before she tripped over something in the dark. She fell hard, scraping her hands on stone. Before she could rise, Celine was on her again. "You're mine," Celine hissed, forcing Georgia onto her back. "I'm going to drain you and turn you." And there's nothing. Celine's words cut off in a gurgle. Georgia felt the vampire's weight lifted away, heard her body hit the far wall. "Touch her again," Wolfram's voice said, deadly quiet, "and I'll make your death last centuries." "Wolfram?" Georgia asked. "But Victor's vampires are dead or fled," Wolfram said. He was breathing hard, which meant he must be badly hurt. "The chalice granted me power when they attacked. I commanded them to stop and they couldn't disobey. Victor tried to resist and his heart burst from the effort. The others ran." "You're hurt," Georgia said, hearing the pain beneath his words. "I'll heal," Wolfram said, "but we need to leave now." "Celine, crawl back to whatever hole you came from. I'm done being merciful." Celine fled. Georgia heard her scrambling away down the passage, then nothing. Wolfram helped Georgia to her feet. "Can you walk?" "Yes," Georgia said. "Can you?" "With you to lean on," Wolfram admitted. They made their way back through the catacombs together, both supporting each other. When they finally emerged into the abbey, Georgia felt sunlight on her face. "It's dawn," Wolfram said. "I need to get inside, away from the light." "But you're already in the abbey," Georgia said, confused. "I need deeper shade," Wolfram said. "The collapsed roof lets in too much light." "Georgia, I'm going to give you the chalice. Take it outside, away from the abbey. Hide it in the woods until sunset, then bring it back." "I can't carry it in sunlight even with my strength." "What if someone comes?" Georgia asked. "They won't," Wolfram said. "The abbey is warded now. The chalice activated old protections when I claimed it. We're safe here, trust me." Georgia took the chalice from him. It was warm despite being crystal, and it pulsed gently in her hands like a living heart. She made her way outside, counting steps, and found a hollow between tree roots where she could hide the artifact. When she returned to the abbey, she found Wolfram in a shadowed corner, pale and still. For a terrifying moment, Georgia thought he was dead. Then he spoke. "I'm here," he said. "Just resting. Come sit with me." Georgia settled beside him, and he pulled her close. She leaned her head against his shoulder, exhausted. "We did it," Georgia said. "We found the chalice." "You did it," Wolfram corrected. "Without you, I never would have found it. Without you, I wouldn't have had a reason to look." "What happens now?" Georgia asked. "Now I hide the chalice somewhere even I will forget," Wolfram said, "using magic to seal it and erase my memory of the location. It's the only way to keep it truly safe. And then," he paused, "then I'd like to take you home. To my home if you'll have me. Not as claimed consort but as partner, as the woman I love." Georgia's breath caught. "You love me? We've known each other barely a week." "I've known you long enough," Wolfram said. "In 700 years I've learned to recognize what matters. You matter, Georgia. You matter more than anything." Georgia turned in his arms, reaching up to cup his face. "I love you too," she said, "which is insane, and my therapist would probably have a field day with it, but it's true." Wolfram kissed her, gentle despite the ferocity Georgia could sense beneath his control. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I can't give you normal," he said. "I can't give you safe or simple, but I can give you everything I am for as long as you'll take it." "Then give me forever," Georgia said. "When I'm ready, when we've had time to be sure, turn me." "I want the centuries, Wolfram. I want them with you." "Are you certain?" Wolfram asked. "You'd be giving up the sun, the warmth, everything human." "I've lived in darkness for 3 years," Georgia said. "I'm not afraid of it anymore, and I'm not afraid of forever if it's with you." They stayed in the abbey until sunset, talking quietly, making plans for the future. When full darkness fell, Wolfram retrieved the chalice and performed the spell that would hide it and erase his memory of where he'd placed it. Georgia felt the magic work, felt the knowledge leave both their minds like water draining away. "It's done," Wolfram said when he finished. "The chalice is gone, hidden so completely that even I can't find it. Celine's quest ends here." They returned to Paris, then flew back to the States. The danger was over, but Georgia's new life was just beginning. Over the next year, Georgia moved permanently into Wolfram's residence. She learned about vampire society, met the members of his court, and became a fixture in their world. Isolde became a close friend, teaching Georgia about vampire history and politics. Georgia also resumed working in the art world, using Wolfram's connections to build a consulting business that didn't require sight. She described pieces over video calls, researched provenance, and slowly built back the career she'd thought she'd lost. But the best part was Wolfram. Every evening when he rose, every night they spent together, Georgia fell deeper in love. He showed her his world with patience and care, never pushing but always there when she needed him. On the anniversary of the night they met, Wolfram took Georgia to the gallery in his residence. He guided her to a new piece he'd installed, something she hadn't felt before. "Give me your hands," he said. Georgia reached out and her fingers touched canvas. But this canvas had raised elements, textures that formed shapes under her exploring touch. A face, rendered in three-dimensional paint and fabric. Her face. "You commissioned a portrait I could see," Georgia whispered. "I commissioned a portrait of the woman I love," Wolfram said. "One that celebrates who you are, not who you used to be. Do you like it?" "It's beautiful," Georgia said, tears streaming down her face. "You're beautiful, then you'll marry me?" Wolfram asked. "In the way of vampires and humans both? You'll be my wife in truth, not just in claim?" "Yes," Georgia said. 1,000 times yes." They married in the underground court, surrounded by vampires who bowed to their king and his human bride. Georgia wore a dress of midnight blue silk, and Wolfram described her as radiant. When they exchanged vows, Georgia felt the weight of eternity settling around them like a blessing. 6 months later, Georgia asked Wolfram to turn her. They'd discussed it extensively, ensuring she understood exactly what she'd be giving up and gaining. On a quiet night in their private chambers, Wolfram drank from her and gave her his blood in return. The transformation was agony and ecstasy combined. Georgia felt her human life drain away, replaced by something colder and stronger and infinite. When she woke 3 days later, she opened her eyes and saw, not with her original vision, but with vampire sight. The world appeared in shades of heat and energy, in auras and emotions. She could see Wolfram's face for the first time, pale and perfect and heartbreakingly beautiful. His white hair fell to his shoulders and his eyes were the color of old silver. "Hello," Wolfram said, smiling down at her. "Welcome to forever." Georgia reached up and touched his face, marveling at actually seeing what she was touching. "You're even more beautiful than I imagined." "And you were already beautiful," Wolfram said. "But now you're eternal. My wife, my partner, my equal. Georgia Calidus, vampire queen of the Eastern Territories." Georgia laughed, the sound ringing through their chambers like bells. She'd hidden her blindness for 3 years, built walls to keep the world out, and then a vampire king had seen through all of it, seen her truly and loved her anyway. Now she saw too. Not just the physical world, but the truth of what she'd become. Strong, eternal, loved beyond measure. She'd thought losing her sight meant losing everything, but it had actually been the path to finding the one thing that mattered most. She'd found home, she'd found love, she'd found forever, and she'd never been more grateful for the darkness that had led her there. Years passed, then decades. Georgia and Wolfram ruled the Eastern Territories together, respected and feared in equal measure. Georgia's blindness became legend in the vampire world, the queen who'd navigated the mortal world without sight, and the vampire world with perfect vision. She became an advocate for vampires who struggled with their transition, using her own experience to help them adapt. Celine was never seen again in their territory. Rumors suggested she'd fled to Asia, but no one knew for certain. The Crimson Chalice remained hidden, its location lost even to the vampire who'd concealed it. Georgia and Wolfram traveled the world, visiting art galleries and museums, collecting pieces for their private collection. Georgia could finally see the paintings she'd only known through research, and Wolfram delighted in watching her experience them for the first time. On quiet nights, they'd return to the residence and sit in the gallery together, surrounded by centuries of art. Georgia would rest her head on Wolfram's shoulder and he'd hold her close, marveling at the woman who'd changed everything. "Do you regret it?" Wolfram asked one night. "Losing your human life?" "Never," Georgia said. "I lost my human sight years before I lost my life. But I gained you, and I gained forever. That's a fair trade." "I love you," Wolfram said. "I'll love you for all the centuries ahead of us." "I love you too," Georgia said, "and I'll love you for every single one." They stayed like that until dawn, vampire king and vampire queen, together in the darkness that had brought them together. Georgia had hidden her blindness from the world, protecting herself from pity and pain. But Wolfram had seen through the secret, seen past the walls she'd built, and found the woman beneath. He'd given her protection, then love, then eternity. And Georgia had given him the same in return. Two lonely souls finding each other in a world that had tried to keep them apart. The darkness wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with love, with purpose, with forever. And Georgia had never seen anything more clearly than the truth of what she and Wolfram had built together. She'd been blind, and now she saw. She'd been mortal, and now she was eternal. She'd been alone, and now she was loved. The story that had begun with deception ended with truth. The woman who'd hidden her blindness had found a vampire who saw her completely. And together they'd created something that would last forever. Georgia Wright had hidden that she was blind from her suitor, until the vampire king saw through the secret. And in seeing through it, he'd given her everything she'd ever wanted, and so much more. Their love story was complete, their future stretching out endlessly ahead of them, and every single moment of forever would be worth the darkness that had brought them together. They'd found each other, claimed each other, and chosen each other. And in a world of danger and politics and ancient powers, that simple choice was the most powerful magic of all. The end was really a beginning, and the beginning would last for all eternity. Georgia and Wolfram, together forever, in darkness and in light, in love beyond measure. And they lived, truly lived, happily ever after.